watch this.
The latest library bill gets a full hearing in front of a full House in the House State Affairs Committee. 2 hours of moms, grandparents, and librarians telling lawmakers what they think of it. And despite the majority of testimony going against it, House Bill 314 is now headed to the House floor. You could kind of tell where the library bill was headed even before the hearing concluded. Of course, a lot of that tell came from the committee chair. Meanwhile, people honored the life and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the Idaho Capitol today. You're going to hear the message that was shared with Idahoans and what the holiday means to those who were there.
It's a process. It's not over till it's over. So, that was kind of a foregone
conclusion. That's how he meant to conclude that sentence. That's Eastern Idaho librarian telling us what he thought of the State Affairs Committee meeting today. They passed a bill to the House floor to regulate what content is available and accessible in libraries for minors. And during the 2-hour proceedings today, Republican Representative Julianne Young from Blackfoot asked at least a handful of times to those opposed to the bill, do you believe that graphic sexual content is harmful to minors? But that loaded question, kind of like, have you stopped beating your wife, wasn't the question at issue today in that hearing. By the way, Robert, who you just heard from, he had a really good answer for Representative Young. We're going to get to that in just a moment. The question was, though, who determines what is graphic sexual content and whether that is actually available to kids in Idaho's libraries? Was the answer a foregone conclusion, like Robert just said? Was the decision to pass the bill really decided before the public even got in a word in edgewise? Well, it's the third straight year the legislature has visited this issue, and we're still hearing from all the same voices. Here's Andrew Bartline.
Posted on the early morning State Affairs docket.
House Bill 384.
A packed House gathered at the third consecutive run.
Or Representative Crane.
To regulate library content.
The Children's and Library Protection Act.
All to decide what is or isn't appropriate for minors.
No material will be banned. No material will be burned. It will simply be relocated.
Away from the kids and toward the adults. Supporters say that's reasonable.
I stand for any questions.
But a select section of the gallery
Welcome to House State Affairs.
Thank you.
Found more interest in answering the questions.
And I'm a children's librarian in Meridian.
Themselves.
I think the practical part of implementing this bill is problematic.
Gathering from their personal experience a collection of arguments against the legislation.
I believe this bill would start a precedent for further limitations on people's freedom to choose where and how they get their information.
Committee will go at ease for 5 minutes.
Now, this is probably the point where you start wondering, what about the librarians that supported this bill? Well, it's simple. There were none. Including Mary DeWalt.
I think it's because librarians see the logistical issues with the bill and the constitutional issues with the bill.
And that's not to say all parents fully agree with the librarians.
This book contains obscene sexual activities, violence, and profanity. It's in the teen section of the library, at least in Colin U. Stick.
On the other hand, those books that 15-year-old checked out might be a good fit for a different 15-year-old.
But through back and forth banner,
Sorry, Paige, these are not appropriate for any 15-year-old kid.
we know where the committee chair stands, too.
Any further
And
questions?
I don't know what the books in
Okay,
question you're talking about.
yep. So now you kind of see the dilemma. So.
Not appropriate for any minor.
So
I'm sorry. Yep, you're under 18. You probably shouldn't grab that. Representative Holtzclaw, would you mind to grab that?
Including the page.
Good call.
But the librarians continue to contend it's more complicated than that.
I'm just curious to know, do you believe that graphic sexual content is harmful to minors?
You ask a yes or no question, and it's not a yes or no question. If you have a child that's been molested, excuse me.
That's Robert Wright.
Kind of got choked up a minute up there.
Yeah.
What got you?
I know people who have had those situations. And it's tough. It's a tender moment. And so those people need access to those materials.
In simple terms, an educational tool for an abused child to understand what happened to them. But Bill's supporters say they're an exception, not the rule.
I'm going to go back to my library board and share what I've learned and share what I believe the intentions of the legislature are appearing to be. This is a very, very subtle bill. It's a very light touch. And I think it gives guidance to library boards, school boards on how they should work on their own curation policies.
On the heels of previously rehearsed and now rehashed years-long volley,
Representative Gannon?
the bill passed committee
Representative Coberly?
No.
along party lines.
Motion passes 11 to 2. Committee, that completes our work for today. We'll stand adjourned.
Teachers also largely opposed that bill as well. Some who did support it that were teachers currently work in homeschool. One of those teachers was formerly a public educator, but has since turned her attention to teaching her own kids at home. And again, Brian, you heard from Brian Allman at the end there. We're familiar with him, who does sit on a library board, Eagle Library, but no librarian specifically gave any support to the bill today.
Well, Representative Jaron Crane, who brought this bill forward, said today he spoke with librarians when he was crafting this bill, and he said he talked to the governor after the end of last session when he vetoed it, and he said he had 2 issues with it. The governor did.
Yeah.
He didn't want there to be any frivolous lawsuits, and they didn't want Idaho libraries to go bankrupt because of this. So he says he addressed those things by having a 30-day relocation form fill out and lowering in that award of $2,500 down to $250.
Yep.
But the question is, did it eliminate these? And the librarians say no. And I think it's interesting that what he pointed out to is that all this is doing is relocating that material to a section in the library that is not accessible to minors. Some libraries don't have other sections, and I'm not curious, or I'm not sure what part of the library is inaccessible to minors.
Well, that was another part of the discussion too, and I think at some point there was a disagreement between some lawmakers and some librarians in the room where the librarians say, we're not going to put a bouncer in the library. We're not going to be checking IDs like it's a nightclub. And the lawmaker said, well, we're not telling you have to do that. Where the librarians are saying, well, when I read it, I feel like we should be. So maybe the language isn't explicit enough, but there seem to be the 2 sides not on the same page.
Well, I'm sure there'll be further debate in the House when it gets there officially. We'll hear about that too. All right, thank you very much, Andrew. Well, there was a part of today's testimony which Andrew included in his stories you just heard when House State Affairs Chairman Brett Crane was addressing Paige Beach, a children's librarian in Meridian. And he wasn't just addressing Paige, but actually pushing back a bit against her testimony that this bill and those in favor of it are just fear-mongering, with specific sections of a book taken out of context. When Paige brought up what's too much for one 15-year-old might be good fit for another 15-year-old, as you heard in Andrew's story, Chairman Crane interrupted to say, quote, sorry, Paige, these are not appropriate for any 15-year-old kid. We don't know which book to which Chair Crane was referring, but he has already made that decision for all 15-year-olds, apparently. But that exchange only highlights what else we noticed during this morning's hearing, how Chair Crane ran it. Idaho's legislature follows parliamentary procedure, specifically Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure, which lays out how a committee hearing is supposed to go. And some could say Chair Crane may have played a little loose with that interpretation.
My job is just to run the process, so...
And that's the description given by Mason's Manual of Legislative Procedure. From calling the meeting to order to ruling on points of order, the purpose of the chair is to conduct the order of the meeting in a fair and equitable manner.
But I do have a question for you. What would you have liked Representative Crane to include in the bill or exclude from the bill? Or do you think it's a good idea that we put some of those provisions in place for minors so that they're not around materials or around beverages until they reach the age of 18? So I'll ask one more question. The chair's not supposed to ask many questions, but I'll ask because this is of interest to me. So I have a question for you, Mr. Wright. Can you point to me the section where it's requiring you, section in the bill that's requiring you to post a guard in there and lock your, elevator, et cetera, et cetera? So according to the sponsor, he's saying he's not censoring. He's just asking them to relocate it. Can you show me where the censoring is at?
The role of the chair is to also keep the meeting going, on task, not waste time.
Was there an election in your library district last year? And could you describe what the results of the election were?
I'm going to let that question stand, but I think you are asking a question you know the answer to.
Well, yes. I do.
Yeah, that's called leading the witness.
Okay, so no asking questions you know the answer to, and no leading the witness.
Just to drill further, so you're telling me that if I find a book offensive and I fill out this form, that they are not removing the book, they're just simply relocating the book somewhere in the library?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
Mason's manual also notes the chair should not make motions, should not enter the debate, and should avoid the appearance of bias.
I haven't heard a library yet that doesn't have a policy. It sounds like they all have a policy. It's not working. These books still are coming up, and we're seeing last year we had books that were in Meridian libraries that have no business being in the hands of minors. Seeing none, the secretary will call the roll.
So it's perhaps no surprise.
Chairman Crane.
Aye.
This bill will show itself to the House floor.
Representative.
Okay, so according to Mason's manual, merely asking a question is not considered debate. But as you heard, what we heard from the chair, sometimes that seemed to go beyond asking a question. We did reach out to Representative Crane, by the way, to ask how he thought he handled the State Affairs Committee hearing today, but we have yet to hear back. And as you already heard, House Bill 384 now headed to the House for a full debate. Okay, so this battle over what kids should and should not have access to, it's not a new one, of course. This argument over books and libraries has been going on for a couple of years, since House Bill 666 3 years ago. It isn't slowing down either. People have been trying to limit how kids express themselves or how they access stuff for decades. And just like these days, this isn't the only time others are simply asking parents to monitor their kids' behavior. What's old is new again. Here's John Miller with a nearly 30-year-old example of that in today's 208 Redial.
They battle the world's meanest villains every day, but have the Power Rangers met their match at this Boise daycare center?
Superheroes just are not appropriate for 3-year-olds.
That's why daycare director Kathy Stout is battling back, requesting that children not be allowed to wear superhero clothing here or carry superhero toys like these. If you think it sounds drastic,
come spend 11 hours with us one day. We'll have Power Ranger Day and we'll let you be in charge. Until you've experienced it, you just cannot appreciate the aggression that it brings out in young children.
So have you guys ever heard of Power Rangers? Yeah! In fact, these Kelsch Elementary students are quick to show off the moves and rattle off the names of their heroes.
Black Ranger, Red Ranger, Trini.
Still, parent and teacher aide Terry Dubois says she doesn't see a lot of Power Ranger play at recess. When she does, she handles it one-on-one.
But I'm not sure they should ban the clothing, maybe discuss the behavior, but I'm not sure about banning the clothing.
It is a difficult issue, raising all kinds of questions like, is this ban constitutional? And is this the face of a superhero?
You and I can wear a Bart Simpson t-shirt and we don't think we're Bart Simpson. Right. A young child, a 3-year-old child, puts on a Power Ranger shirt and they are a Power Ranger.
There's a place for it and a time for it, but I think that in a school situation where they have so many kids, I agree, it can be eliminated and it won't hurt anybody.
Wow, times certainly have not really changed much. As you can see, this type of debate has been happening for years. Superheroes are not appropriate for 3-year-olds. All right, well, the targets of the bans, obviously, are the only thing that have been changing over the years, and of course, the hairstyles. Worth noting, Power Rangers clothes were never banned in preschools, and in 1994, those kids, well, they were about 5 years old, I guess, putting them in their 30s now. Could be kind of cool to catch up with some of those featured in that story. If you recognize any of them, let us know. We'd love to find out if their t-shirts dictate how they behave today, or even back then. But that could explain a lot of the dad bod t-shirts out there. Today is Martin Luther King Jr. Day across America, and here in Idaho, that is marked by also known as Idaho Human Rights Martin Luther King Jr. Day. MLK Day began as a federal holiday in 1986. In 1990, the Gem State became the 47th state to officially recognize this day, adding in the Idaho Human Rights Day part. The Capitol celebration this afternoon featured passionate words from keynote speaker Boise Rabbi Dan Fink. History, politics, and those who play with them, i.e. Idaho lawmakers, should all be viewed through the lens of human rights. Are they being celebrated or squashed? It's a message Joe Paris and all others in attendance heard in the Capitol Rotunda.
Inside a warm Idaho State House, Boise Rabbi Dan Fink has a strong message.
Year after year, the worst extremists run roughshod over common sense and decency.
Echoing the unmatched words of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Rabbi Fink took center stage as keynote speaker at Idaho's Human Rights Martin Luther King Jr. Day.
Too many of the legislators charged with protecting the rights of our most vulnerable citizens instead seem to revel in bashing immigrants, eviscerating reproductive rights, and endangering lesbian, gay, queer, and trans Idahoans.
Fink highlighted words from Idahoans in recent years, Idahoans who believe all are not seen as equal.
All too often, walking through the door of this State House feels like entering Dante's gate to hell, with its infamous inscription, "Abandon all hope, ye who enter here."
The question hangs for those that agree, where to go from here.
We seek solace and we seek wisdom from those who have traveled the path before us. Dr. King's vision of hope was hewn out of a mountain of despair.
There have been times when I thought I couldn't last for long.
Solace from Idahoans like Cherie Buckner Webb.
To carry on, it's been a long, long time coming.
Idaho's first elected African-American state lawmaker.
A change is gonna come.
She mirrors the words of Sam Cooke in his anthem of the civil rights movement, the movement of Dr. King's legacy.
Dr. King spoke prophetically the night before his own death. We've got some difficult days ahead, but it doesn't matter to me now because I've been to the mountaintop.
In his final address before his death, Dr. Martin Luther King talks about seeing the promised land, a place where equality exists for all. Rabbi Fink describes the challenges he sees getting there.
Instead of working through our legitimate differences on assumptions and tactics, we divide too often into competing tribes, prioritizing ideological absolutism over consensus and compromise. We may have come over on different ships, but we're in the same boat now.
As Fink detailed battles he sees ahead,
we need to think bigger than 2 to 4 year political cycles. Instead of pouring millions of dollars into futile races, we can build a movement starting with PTOs, school boards, county commissions, highway districts, home by home, neighborhood by neighborhood, door by door.
The rabbi maintains optimism for fulfilling Dr. King's dream.
My friends, I believe a change is gonna come. That one day this Capitol dome will ring with liberty and justice for all Idahoans. So people get ready. There's work to be done. Let's dance.
And the event inside the Capitol followed a march from Boise State University in the cold all the way down into downtown Boise. Brian, a pretty well-attended event considering all the weather.
I was going to ask you, so I should say Rabbi Fink calling out the legislators, lawmakers, were very many of them in attendance, and how was what he said, calling them out like that, received?
I can tell you that, in terms of lawmakers standing around the rotunda while he gave that speech, there wasn't many. I saw a handful walk out of their offices. In terms of the general public, though, it was very quiet in the rotunda, and the words, as they echoed through, they really hit with some people. A lot of applause as well.
All right, well, just down the hall, Governor Brad Little sent out a message honoring Martin Luther King Day earlier today, posted a statement on social media. Quote, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s civil rights leadership and message of hope have inspired generations of Americans, he said. Today, let us continue his good work and dedicate ourselves to advancing the basic principles of our Constitution, liberty and justice for all. Meanwhile, Senator Mike Simpson also commenting today, posting on social media today, please join me in honoring the life of Martin Luther King Jr., whose powerful legacy serves as an inspiration to us all. I bet your snow shovel got to work out this weekend, and all this snow and ice left behind has caused roads to be closed and then reopened, but it hasn't stopped cars from catching fire, believe it or not. Abby Davis explains that and everything else you need to know in today's 411 from around the 208.
The Caldwell Police Department says it responded to reports of a vehicle fire on Belmont Street just before 5:30 this morning. When police and firefighters got there, they found one car fully engulfed in flames and a second car on fire. They evacuated a nearby house until firefighters put the fires out. Police are investigating. They say the fires may have been deliberately set. A portion of westbound I-84 is back open. The stretch between Broadway and Eisenman Road was closed earlier because of multiple crashes and extremely icy conditions. No injuries were reported and things are looking better now. But BPD says be careful because conditions are expected to get icy again as the sun goes down. Good news. Gas prices dropped again. AAA says the average price of a gallon of regular unleaded gas is $3.05. That's about 7 cents less than last week, 32 cents less than a month ago, and about 33 cents less than this time last year. Prices here have even dropped below the national average, which sits at about $3.07 a gallon. And that's the 411 on the 208. I'm Abby Davis.
All right, still sorting through some of the text messages you sent in, but let's start with this one right here from Julie. Of course, the library bill was decided ahead of time because otherwise all those lawmakers are afraid they'll be put on the Idaho Freedom Foundation's naughty list. That's what Julie has to say. So anyone can fill out a form and the library automatically puts the book in a special area. Who's determining if that book really does contain harmful materials? Just asked Sheila, but goes along with this question. Just curious, who's responsible for managing the library bill? This is the public is responsible for bringing it to the library's attention. They have 30 days to move it if they decide to, or they can say, no, we kind of like this book where it is, and you can either let it go, or then you can file a civil suit and sue them for that $250 and possibly some damages. And I think that's the problem that a lot of librarians have, is they may feel it belongs where it is in the library based on, well, the community they serve. Somebody could come in from out of town, another town, and say, I don't like it there. I think you're making a mountain out of a molehill. In the Power Ranger story, the teachers weren't saying no to allowing children to play Power Ranger toys, et cetera. They were simply saying they didn't want them allowed in school because it led to more aggressive behavior. We're not drawing a direct correlation. We're just saying that if you're banning a shirt because you think it makes a kid violent, well, isn't that kind of like what the argument, if there's a book in the library, does that make somebody gay or transgender? Which is kind of what the argument is with this one. We'll see you tomorrow.